Let's think of a spotlight theory of attention. And if you'll indulge me, I didn't capture the definition here, but here it is. And this is on page 80. Um, Other cognitive psychologists often use different metaphors when talking about attention. For example, some compare attention to a spotlight that highlights whatever information the system is focused on. And accordingly, psychologists are now concerned less with determining what information can't be processed than with what kinds of information people choose to focus on. So that's a different idea. Attention, like a spotlight, has fuzzy boundaries. Spotlights can highlight more than one object at a time, depending on the size of the object, and attention can be directed at more than one task at a time, depending on the capacity demands for each task. So, of course, the spotlight metaphor is not perfect, and some researchers think it has its shortcomings. So, to see this, let's consider the spotlight metaphor in a little bit more detail. Just as a spotlight's focal point can be moved from one area of a stage to another, so can attention be directed and redirected to various kinds of information. And just as a spotlight shines best what's at its center, so too is cognitive processing usually enhanced when attention is directed toward something. Of course, these things stand to reason. So it's also true, and this is something that what Kahneman would have said, and by the way, Kahneman's still with us, who's in his mid-80s now. His 50-year-old research. Daniel Kahneman presented a slightly different model of what attention is. He viewed attention as a set of cognitive processes for categorizing and recognizing stimuli. The more complex the stimulus, the harder the processing, and therefore the more resources are engaged. However, people have some control over where they direct their resources, and they can often choose what to focus on and devote their mental energy to. So an analogy could be made to an investor depositing money in one or more of several accounts, that the individual deposits mental capacity to one or more of several tasks. Many factors influence this allocation of capacity, which itself depends on the extent and type of resources available. And the availability of mental resources is affected by arousal. And what do they mean by arousal? Is how keyed up you are, central nervous system arousal. So if you've had a lot of coffee or just a good night's sleep, you've got a pretty good chance of having a fair amount of central nervous system arousal to rise to occasions. And that doesn't mean that you're keyed up necessarily. Ironically, that arousal often means a person is more subdued. Their mind is so active, their mental processing is so active that their physical person is often more subdued. And this is at the heart of why some ADHD medicines work. They're actually stimulants, which is ironic. You're giving a stimulant to somebody that already has trouble concentrating. And the notion is, with that arousal, they become more internally focused, their processing becomes more active, and they become more physically contained. So this arousal affects our capacity for tasks, but the model still needs to specify how we allocate our resources to all the cognitive tasks that confront us. So he says that individuals have allocation policies, if you will, that are affected by enduring personality traits, momentary intentions, your vow to find your meal card right now before anything else happens, an evaluation of demands on one's capacity, the knowledge that a task you need to do right now will require a lot of attention. So all of those things are affected by that central nervous system arousal, and it affects our capacity to do those things. So essentially this model predicts, and this is drawing on Kahneman here, that we pay more attention to things we're interested in, are in the mood for, or have judged as an emergency or something that we need to pay attention to. For example, opera lovers listen carefully during an operatic performance, concentrating on the nuances of the performance. And people less interested in opera may have a hard time even staying awake. In Kahneman's view, attention is part of what the layperson would call mental effort. And the more you like something, or the more of an emergency it is, as a product of this idea of being somewhat aroused, then the more likely we are to pay attention. I'm that way with Major League Baseball. I happen to be a gigantic baseball fan. I really enjoy going. And I hang on every pitch. I really enjoy every aspect of it. I think it's a lot of fun. Uh, Last night, and this is one of the reasons for my delay, I'm not very proud of this, but I had long-standing plans to see my favorite musician in Houston. And before that, I had a bit of an emergency during the daytime, so it affected my ability to get the videos up when I wanted to. But we had these tickets for months to go see my favorite band in Houston. Her name is Lydia Lovelace, a young singer, only 33. But I just hung on every word. I knew these songs very well, and it was a rapturous occasion for me. And one of the reasons was I was able to pay such close attention is because that was as the first sentence says, that's one of the things I'm interested in. So it wasn't the case that it was an emergency. It wasn't super important, if you will, but I was really, really interested in how she delivered her music and the intonation and everything. And it sounded, of course, incredible. Very small crowd, about 200 people. It was really an unusual event. I rarely go to, that's probably the first concert I've been to in 15 years. So this arousal affects all of those things. The model needs to specify other things, but like what you're interested in, what is a priority for you, what your circumstances are right now. But that's all part and parcel to the spotlight. Where we direct things, what our priorities are by interest or by emergency, and the degree to which we're keyed up and able to attend to all these things, according to Daniel Kahneman, who, by the way, just 8 years after this, won the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize with his partner Amos Tversky, speaking about economics. Sorry about that. In psychology, and has become a spokesperson for many other things. And as recently as 2011, had a best-selling book. So he might be roughly 90, but he's still very outspoken and has a lot to say about things. So it's interesting how many of these psychologists made great contributions 50 plus years ago, and we're still talking about them today. Very relevant people.